Well, hello. Let me see who's out there. We got a couple people out there already, and say hello in the chat. I'd love to know who you are, and I know that other people will be coming in really soon. Mary, how you doing over there?
I'm good, John. How are you doing?
Not bad. I enjoyed the movie last night. It was it was a tough movie to watch, and it'll be interesting to see how other people felt about it as they watched it. I generally, when I watch a movie, I might come away with it with an overall feeling. And I knew that this was a movie that we were going to be talking about on a live stream. I didn't really take notes or anything, but I know that things will come to me as we go along. There's John. Good morning, John. Good to see you over there. So I don't know. Before we get going, I guess I should just say, give everybody an update on what's going on with our Tuesday night meeting. It was too much for me to do that, and the live stream and the podcast. So I'm not going to do that regular Tuesday night meeting thing anymore. But maybe what we'll do is like have special events for listeners, so I can have like a speaker maybe every quarter or every so often come on and have that just for listeners of the podcast to do like we were doing with our meetings. So um, I'm kind of glad I did that because I'm going to be out of town next week anyway. So it's like sometimes I'm not going to be around anyway. So I enjoyed the meeting, but it's not something I'm going to be able to do anymore. But
And it's good that you know that, and you can keep it
yeah.
simple.
Well, I have a bad habit of always of overloading myself with things, but I'm also back on schedule with posting regular episodes every Wednesday, and I want to keep that up going forward. That's pretty important to me. And Mary, do you have anything new to say about the conference? Anything new going on there?
The conference is being planned as we speak, and we have wonderful topics, wonderful speakers, and I'm will be having this podcast live streamed during the conference at same time, same channel, but the whole world will be watching.
Yeah.
And then I'll be also hostessing a women's panel, which will be at 5 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday, the next day, the 30th.
Okay. Okay.
And I'll let you know exactly. We're probably after tomorrow's planning session, we'll have the schedule nailed down,
Super.
and I'll be able to post a flyer for you next week. Yep.
Okay. That sounds good. And we can go over that maybe on the next live stream that we do after it's been posted, and maybe have some people on from the planning committee to come on to talk about it if they want to.
That'd be wonderful. I can make that happen for sure. And we have to figure out what we're going to be doing on our podcast.
Oh, I know. If anybody out there has any suggestions of what we might want to do at ICSA, on the online ICSA for this live stream, let me know, and we'll certainly take suggestions. So, well, maybe we should get into the movie. So this was a tough movie for I think anybody who had anything to do with addiction, whether you're the addict or the loved one of one. But I would even say it doesn't even have to be an addict. I thought a lot about my younger brother with mental illness as well, and how heartbreaking that could be to try to help somebody that you really can't help.
Yes, which one of my most impactful parts of the movie, and if y'all haven't seen it, it's called Beautiful Boy, and it's starring Steve Carell and Timothy Chalamet and Maura Tierney are some of the people in it. And I saw it on Prime Video last night because I have Amazon Prime. So I think toward the end, when he said to his ex-wife, "I don't think we can save we can't save anybody."
Right.
And I think it was as much of an Al-Anon movie as it was an addiction movie.
It truly was. I think probably more so because it was really shown from the view of the father more than anything else. I could really feel what he was going through. But the movie started, I thought it was really interesting. So the movie starts with a scene that played later on. He's like in the office of a psychiatrist, I believe, or a doctor or some sort of expert in addiction. And he asked two questions. He said, I think the questions were, what's going on? He wants to understand what's happening, and what can I do to help? Or, and that doctor, and I think in the beginning of the movie, it stopped there. Okay, it stopped there. You didn't get the
Yes.
doctor's answer, but
Right.
you did get the doctor's answer later on, which I found really interesting. But that's what he wanted to know is what's wrong with my son and how can I help him?
Mhm.
So anyway, that's where it begins. And then they introduce, I guess, the family dynamics. They introduce the kid when he's before he
Small.
becomes addicted, right?
Yes.
And he's smart, he's talented, and it seems like that they have a close father-son relationship. I didn't really pick up Mary on the relationship with the father and the husband and wife. Did because I know they split, but did they split after the son had problems? I
No,
can't remember. No,
it
they
was
didn't.
before because
Okay.
it looks like he went to live with his dad early on
Okay,
in
I thought
maybe
that might be the
preteen world.
case.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think that the kid was somehow thinking that those problems might have had something to do with his addiction, maybe. I don't know, but so anyway, so they did have that dynamic going on, and then he that's right because he remarried, right? He
Mhm.
remarried, and
He
his son
remarried
was
when the kid was, like, maybe 7 or 8
yep,
or 9, yeah, and
yep,
then they had 2 more children.
yep. That and then so I it was kind of different. The relationship between the father and the son, they were very close. Almost it didn't feel like a father-son relationship in some way to me. It felt like the father should have been, I don't know, not a buddy. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? I don't know, but I'm not a father, but it seemed like he was more of a buddy than a father. Um, but I don't want to, who's to say? I don't know.
Right, I mean, we all had our different interpretations of it, and,
Yeah,
I thought it was a beautiful relationship and how close
yeah,
they were,
yeah,
and I thought that the kid knew that the dad loved him.
yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Mhm.
So anyway, so yeah, the later on though, I there was a scene where the son, I wish I remembered his name, but the son,
His name was Nick.
Nick, that's right, Nick. He said to his father that he felt like he was like his project. He felt like he was he let his father down because he felt that his father thought he was this great creation of his, you know.
That's what he said. Yep.
Yep, this great creation, and the father was saying, "Who are you?" And the kid said, "This is who I am." Okay, Dale, thank you for letting me know. I should never speak about something I have no experience with. I was speaking about towards my own father, which was he was a totally opposite character from this guy. But anyway,
But I also think if he had been a more of an a Santorini kinda dad or an more of an authority figure,
yeah,
nothing would have been any different.
you're right. You're right.
As far
Absolutely.
as the Nick's addiction and its expression of being an addiction, I think he couldn't have stopped it if he tried.
Right. Yeah, the doctor, I remember going back to that doctor, he did give a good explanation about what was going on with Nick with these drugs. And in particular, gosh, I'm sorry my memory is so bad. The drug that was the worst that he was addicted to,
Crystal meth.
crystal meth. And anyway, when they got the kid into treatment, the father asked, what's the chances? What's your success rate?" And the woman gave like really some really totally off the wall figures. Like I think she said 80% on the high and like 25% or something like that on the low end. And we know that it's nothing like that at all. So that was totally misrepresented. And later in the movie, he goes back to that conversation with that doctor, and the doctor says the success rates are in the single digits,
Mhm.
and he really gives him the truth. And he also explains the addiction cycle where the he needs more and more and more of the drug just to be even.
Level out. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah. It
yep,
was a beautiful depiction of the journey of an addict, of a teenager who gets into drugs, and also of what happens to the family.
yeah,
So you're simultaneously looking at it from both sides, and I think it was very well done.
yeah. I agree. Yeah, it the it reminded me a lot of things that I've gone through in my own life with family members who deal with mental illness, and you can't really reach them. And it's the same way with addiction. I mean, the addict is not himself anymore. He wasn't who he used to be. He had a problem that was that he wasn't willing. He didn't have the capacity to handle himself or to make decisions for himself, and the family was completely helpless. It's almost impossible to compel somebody to do something
Yeah.
for their own good.
Mhm.
Even when Nick got into the hospital, he would leave against advice.
He did.
So
He pulled his IVs out and left.
yep,
Yeah.
yep.
It was a beautifully written story that was written by the real life dad.
Mhm.
I can't remember his name, but I remember the kid's name, Steve.
Nick.
Steve Chef, I think his name was.
Okay.
So it is a book that was turned into a movie, and I wonder how many people watching saw it. Have y'all seen it this week?
Hi, Walker. Hey, Dale and John. Yeah, did anybody watch that movie? Walker is making a comment that speed kills. Um, so yeah, I'm sure it does. I never had experience with drugs like that, so I it's beyond my experience, but I could certainly relate to the just the cycle of addiction and where it took him. And remembering I was a young person when I was dealing with that, and some of the conversations that he had with his father early on were reminiscent of conversations I had. The father was really hoping that Nick would go to college and be successful and so forth. And Nick, I think, made the right decision when he got out of treatment, and that was like, I don't think I'm ready for college right now. I'm going to stay in this halfway house. But the father was very disappointed in that and thought, what's the kid going to do? Make coffee for the rest of his life. And I recall conversations like that with my father at the time. Like, what are you gonna do with your life? It's, and it's a lot of pressure to put on somebody to have to feel like you need to live up to someone else's expectations.
Yeah, and the 20s are kinda like that,
Oh,
and the
they're
teens
hard.
are like that, like, they want you to have a figured out life plan,
Yep.
and not everyone has that figured out.
Oh man, I sure didn't. I bet you a lot of people don't. I mean, that's the time when you should be trying to figure out what your life is going to
Yeah,
be, I
and
guess. But
trying all kinds of things.
yeah,
But I
but
think in hindsight, the dad would have been totally pleased if he had just been a barista for the rest of his life
yep,
as long as he was sober.
yep, absolutely.
Yeah, but at the time, he didn't have the big picture on what the drugs were doing to him and how it affected him and what it meant. I don't think he
Yeah,
had the big picture, but he did a good job of finding out the best sources of information. And he went
yep.
to an Al-Anon meeting and he saw experts and he talked to different rehab people.
Yep. Well, John, I'm sorry. I announced those topics. First of all, it'll be posted a couple days before the live stream on YouTube, so you'll see it there. And then I also post it in our Facebook group if you belong to that, and on the Facebook page. So usually I'll post the announcement of what the live stream will be about 2 days or so before the Saturday. I think I posted it on Thursday, so that's where you would find it. Um, and then Joe Bob says that he hasn't seen the movie Never Took Crystal Meth either. I'm listening and learning here from those of you who did use it and are clean from it. And John says, this sounds familiar to what happened with my addicted son. Well, John, if you'd like to talk about that, feel free to call us if you would. I'll go ahead and put our phone number up there. And that number is, there you go, 844-899-8278. Feel free to call if you'd like to talk about your own personal experience.
Uh,
Alice has a comment. Thank you, Alice. Thanks for saying that about family not being able to help. I sometimes feel caught in the idea that my family just watched me drowning. It would be good to let go of that.
this would be a great movie to watch to see what that other side looks like from a different perspective.
Yeah. The being I really appreciate what family members go through, the family of addicts, just from my own experience and from what my wife is going through right now. My wife's mother is just recently got out of a psychiatric hospital and is dealing with some sort of psychiatric issues, and Oh, just the pain that you go through because the person is no longer who they used to be, and that's the same thing that happens to an addict. They're not the person they used to be, and the things that they say aren't grounded in reality, and you can't really have a rational conversation with the person, whether they be addicted or in active addiction, or if they're just mentally ill. I mean, the two I see are just so similar. And I had many conversations with my wife this last week, when her mother would say things that she normally wouldn't say. I mean, really hurtful things, and I would just say, "Well, that's not the same mom. That's not
Right,
her. You just can't take anything she says as, as meaning anything." And that's
right.
really hard to do when, and I know the same thing within this movie. Nick was not who he was, and they would try to have rational conversations about what was for his own benefit, and none of that works, and it's very, very, very frustrating.
He couldn't really sit still long enough to have a conversation.
No.
Yeah, he was trying to just get his dad to give him $200 so he could go and get more crystal. I mean, that's where he was at. He was just trying to maintain his physical and mental level of that.
Yeah.
But I also have a nephew in my life that is very much like this kid in the movie. And I think his drug was heroin,
Oh,
but
wow.
the family went through a very similar journey as this family did. And he now is over 30, and finally, after maybe the fifth rehab, it worked. And he's now he started his own sober living facility
Oh,
and
cool.
is sober and helping other people get sober. And I always was waiting for the call that he was either going to be in jail or dead. We all
Yeah.
were, and then he was such a beautiful kid, and that's what this movie shows is the child that was this beautiful, loving, creative, fabulous kid, and then they turned into this other person that we didn't know. And then
Mhm.
the similar thing happened with my nephew in the movie. Was this kid in the movie's girlfriend died temporarily while they were doing heroin or crystal meth, and he had to do the
Yep.
CPR to bring her back.
Yep.
And she did come back, but my nephew's girlfriend did not come back.
Oh,
And
man.
he still continued to
Wow.
use the drugs still after that. So it just goes to show there's no end to it, and the family really can't make it stop. And I think this journey in this movie was that the dad finally realized that he couldn't make it stop and that he had to heartbreakingly let go of his kid because he would spend all his days and nights driving around San Francisco looking at for him behind dumpsters.
Yeah.
And he did find him a couple times and try to bring him back, but it didn't last long. And so finally, I think he realized that he had to let go and let the kid make his own choices. And that was heartbreaking.
Yes. And during that scene where he did that, he had a conversation with his ex-wife who wasn't ready to let go and was really trying to, rescue Nick one more time.
Yes.
And, boy, this hit home like crazy. So she was ready to continue trying to help and go rescue and save. He couldn't do it anymore. He said, "I can't do. We can't help him. I can't." And I just hate to keep bringing this back to myself again, but that's the same conversation I had with my family with my younger brother who's schizoaffective. There was that my sister wanted me to go one last time up to Wisconsin to rescue my brother and try to get him into a hospital, but I had enough. I couldn't do it anymore, and I had enough, and that was kind of a break in my family between my sister and I. But I got to the point where I think the father was kind of there too. There were two parts to my thinking, I guess. Number one is I had to take care of my own life. I could not just drop my life all the time and run off and try and the chance that I could put him on a 24-hour or 48-hour hold or something. Just couldn't do it anymore. And secondly, I knew that it was really beyond my power to help him.
Hmm.
And it is heartbreaking. And so I did I could really relate to the father. I mean, I was at that place too, and I just said enough, and I could see the father doing that too. But it was probably the right move, and it was the right move, I think it turned out to be for
Yeah.
Nick,
Yeah. Because
ultimately.
ultimately, he couldn't go back there because there wouldn't be help from that source anymore. He had to go into like talk to your sponsor or
Right.
go
Right.
back somewhere, but he couldn't go there anymore.
Yep. Just
Yeah.
pointed out the
So his
resources.
dad was not enabling anymore.
Right. So John has a comment about his own experience. He says that his son got bad around the age of 19 and had to ask him to leave the house because of his behavior. And God, that's I can you, you, even though you love somebody, you can't let them disrupt your house and your life and your own sanity and other people in the family, and it's so tough. And that's probably the right thing to do. Walker says that AA is a save your own ass program.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And Bobbert has a comment. My brother was schizophrenic. Every time he ended up in a psych ward, when they wanted to transfer him to the alcoholism ward, he signed himself out. Interesting. Did
Mhm.
he, Bobbert, did he have both alcohol use disorder and schizophrenia? I guess that wouldn't be too uncommon.
Right.
And that would be a problem. But yeah, there you go again. Just not being able to make those decisions for your own benefit. And
And I think they also showed in the movie what it feels like for the kid, what his interior world felt like. And he
yeah,
felt so guilty and he was so sorry, but he just couldn't stop. And he would every once in a while, I thought it was great that he could verbalize to his dad, "I'm so sorry." But he just couldn't stop. I mean, he broke into their house when they weren't there and, stole from his little brother and little sister's piggy bank. And we all know that if we are the family of an addict, that those things happen. We all know that. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, there was you really did get a sense that, he realized that his life was out of control, that he couldn't stop. I think he was frustrated that his father um wasn't accepting that for much of the time, and wasn't like really grounded in the reality of what was going on, I guess. I
Mhm.
don't know. It's tough. It's just a really tough thing. So yes, Bobbert says that his brother was a schizophrenic and also on drugs. So um, I'm sure that that's common too. I'm sure that my drinking um, was related to depression. As a way of kind of numbing that out.
Mhm.
Because certainly changing the way I felt. So I think that's pretty common probably as well.
It was a
So
beautifully photographed movie,
it was.
well acted, well written, and the dad wrote it was from the book the dad wrote because I
Hmm.
think the dad, when he couldn't go out on the streets looking for his son anymore and he felt so horrible that he took to writing about, he wrote at his computer, and that's where the book came from. And then the son, Nick Sheff, has also written his own book called Tweaked.
Yeah.
And you can Google both of them. And at the very end, well, I don't want to spoiler alert for anybody, but the movie had a great soundtrack, great sets, great photography, great acting, and I thought it was a wonderful depiction of the pain from both sides.
Hmm.
So if you have someone in your family that's going through this, um, it's a really good movie to watch.
John says, my son was not a wonderful kid, but more of a pain in the ass since he did what he wanted to. So he never changed that much. Yeah. The hard part is that most of us addicts, alcoholics, don't get well. They don't get sober. Most of us. It's the minority of us that make it, that have any kind of clean time.
Right.
And that's, you know, I think it's encouraging that there are more options available now, especially I'm thinking about harm reduction, quite frankly, for drug addiction, so that at least we can keep people from dying. And if you can keep people from dying, there's a hope
Mhm.
still of recovery. And there's more of that going on now that I think is helpful. And also just having a better understanding of addiction, and society as a whole, I think, is getting to have a better um I guess, respect for those who make a decision not to drink for whatever reason, you
Mhm.
know? So I think there's some promising signs out there, but yeah, it's still very, very sad that for the most part, most addicts and alcoholics won't make it. And that's a really hard reality for anyone to accept, especially when you're trying desperately to find help for them. And you will hear from treatment centers and others, that, yeah, we can help. And all the times they can, but sometimes they can't either.
Mhm. And
So
sometimes it takes 5 treatment rehabs for it to click. If
Yeah.
you're lucky. Yeah, if you're
What
lucky.
what do you think about that comment, Mary? When Nick had a relapse after having some clean time, I think it was the person in the halfway house, or maybe it was the person at treatment center, I can't remember, said to the father that relapse is part of recovery. And the father responded, "Well, that's like saying
Right.
crashing is part of learning how to fly
Fly
a
a plane.
plane."
Yeah.
Yeah. What
Well,
do you
I
think?
I appreciated that, but you know what I realized later in the movie was the dad said that same thing.
Did he?
That
Yes, he did. He
yeah,
did.
relapse is a part of recovery. Like, I think the dad had to go through his own journey of, understanding and awareness, and that was part of it because he was later mimicking that phrase, "Relapse is a part of recovery," and it is a part of recovery.
It is.
And you're
It
lucky
is.
if you haven't done your drug of choice since you put it down the first time.
Yep.
You're lucky. You're probably in a minority.
Yeah. If you stop to think about recovery the way that it was explained to me as just a process of change, even if you have a relapse or a slip during that process, as long as that's you learn from it and you move on, then yes, it is part of it. It's part of the learning process. You can learn from that and move on and grow from it as
Right. It
well.
just depends on how long you wallow, I think.
Yeah.
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 I mean, for a lot of people, their sobriety date will keep them sober for a long time because they don't want to go back on the time they have
Hmm.
or have to admit that they don't have that time, like to start at day one again as a pride buster. So I think a sobriety date can keep people sober a long time. I know it worked for me for 16 years until
Yeah.
one day it didn't.
Yeah, it's like there's a certain amount of, and there's nothing wrong with this, having some pride in something that you've done, that,
Absolutely. There's
you
a
know,
pride in a day at a time recovery
yeah,
like no other.
yeah, because it's tough. And I know when I have an anniversary, I look back with gratitude that I am sober, and that I did make it out of
Yeah.
that, and
Do you ever
and
wonder,
I
like, how did you do you ever ask yourself, "How did I do that?" Like, with all the stuff that happened to me, how did I keep choosing not to drink over it?
I know. I sure had some close calls as we mentioned before, but I just count myself lucky in a lot of respects. I just happened to I just lucked out. It was a time of my life where I needed to do that, and there were the right people there to help me. And I didn't have a lot to lose, so I lost everything.
Yeah,
And I think it would have been harder and in this kind of situation. I've been thinking about this. Say that you're like middle age, 40, 50, whatever, and you've got a successful career and your family life seems to be stable, but you can't control your drinking. You're an alcoholic. And it's a lot more difficult, in a situation like that. And you could be suffering more physically than I was, as a younger person. Um, so, because I know there's people like that. They're kind of functional alcoholics, that can kind of keep things together on the outside. So the outside world to them seems like everything's fine, but their drinking is totally out of control. I think a situation like that would be really, really, really hard
yeah.
to
I know
work.
several people like that in my groups here,
Hmm.
and you have so much to lose, so that's so much more intent on hiding it.
Yeah. Yeah. And Joe Bob does mention the money part of all of this. These rehabs are in it for the money, obviously, and their business, and so they will make those declarations
Right.
of what they are able to do that they oftentimes can't. I did an episode with somebody. It was really interesting, but she she was similar to this movie. In this episode, that I did, and I'll post a link to it later on. But what happened is she started a company that actually measures outcomes from treatment.
Oh, I remember this episode. Yep.
Yes, and she created a website for those treatment facilities that participate. She's able to show really what you can expect, and it's real. I mean, she doesn't sugarcoat anything. And it's nice that she did that from her own experience, because she would call these treatment centers and she'd say, "What's your success rate? What's your success rate?" and they'd either give like some outlandish, crazy 80% type thing, or they would say we don't know, and so there wasn't anything. So she wanted to have something that families could use if they're seeking treatment for their loved ones, that they can have some sort of reasonable idea of what to expect when the person leaves treatment. So that's a really good point, Joe Bob. There is a financial incentive, and it's like, I hate don't want to get political, but almost our entire healthcare system is like that. The incentive is to keep people sick almost because because our healthcare system is designed for profit. It's
Right.
so
Keep coming
yeah.
back. Well,
So there's
when that lady said 25% success rate in that movie,
mhm.
I don't think AA has even that 25% rate. I don't know what the latest figures
No,
are, but yeah.
here's something interesting. So I had a comment in on a YouTube video. I had some recently. There's been some like really negative comments on videos about AA and stuff like that. And someone made a comment about AA having a really bad success rate. Well, here's what I would say to that is, first of all, AA isn't treatment. It's
Mm,
not treatment. And it therefore doesn't keep statistics as to how long people stay sober. And what AA does do is provide support. And if you look at the support it provides, it's extremely successful because you, in whatever city you're in, if you want support, you can find it in an AA meeting. And that's what AA does. AA is there to provide support for people. And I think in that sense, it's very, very successful. Now, probably when it comes to individual people staying sober for periods of time, I don't even know how you measure success.
no.
Probably it's the same in AA as it is every place else. We know from research that has been done that the majority of recoveries are spontaneous and they just happen without any sort of treatment or support. They just that's how most what happens most of the time. But for that population that does seek treatment, treatment is different from support. So even Smart Recovery or Life Ring or AA, those are peer support groups. Those aren't treatment. And so I think it's not fair to say that Smart has this sort of a recovery rate and better than the other programs and stuff
Right.
like that. When you
Apples and
should,
oranges.
yeah, look at what they actually do, and are they good at that? And I think they're good at the support, providing a support network. They're pretty good about that. Dale says the phrase "the one that woke up earliest has the most sobriety today" drives me nuts. Sober time matters. It does, and it does because that you've had that time to learn, and grow without being clouded by alcohol or drugs. So in that sense, it really does help. Um, and then yeah, Joe Bob again says the success rates are in single digits. Again, I don't agree because AA doesn't have success rates. They're not published anywhere. There is something called 12-step facilitation therapy that an actual therapist will do, and those have been measured um, along with other treatments. But we should just understand that there's a difference. Okay. Anyway,
And there are a lot
Bobbert,
of there's a
go.
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. Bobbert just says, glad you brought this up because I was just thinking about those complaints. Interesting, Bobbert. I wonder if you might have read those comments as well. Anyway, I had a lot of those comments this last week.
On the YouTube
Yeah,
channel?
on YouTube channel, people that were just making comments about, some negative comments about AA, which is fine. I've made negative comments about
I
AA.
mean,
I
there's
really don't mind.
whole things in on the internet that are nothing but AA bashing. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a lot of what people do, and a lot of people don't like to count their time. There's a whole I've seen
Yeah.
people discuss this on the AA Beyond Belief Facebook page where they don't think they should count their time. They don't want to count their time. But, you know, I think it gives goals, especially in the beginning. It's a goal thing. And then, but I also know that a lot of pride comes with it. But it doesn't mean because I have 27 years that I know any more than somebody that has 1 year. It doesn't mean that. Quantity doesn't mean I'm smarter. I think it just means I have more time making that choice not to drink on a
Right.
daily basis, no matter what happened. I have more
Yep.
experience with that with not drinking. That's
Yep.
all it means. I made a choice to not drink with all the shit that happened in my life for all these years. Is really all it means. I
Well,
learned as much from a person who's got one day. Their wisdom can be so much more clear and fabulous than somebody who's got 40 years.
Mhm.
And a lot of people rest on those laurels of
Mhm.
what their time is, that makes them special and makes them more wise, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I don't go with that, but some
No.
people do.
So at the end of the movie, I guess we do learn that he did stay clean for at least 8 years when the movie was
That's what the final
and
credit
ended.
says. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think it was sort of an ambiguous ending.
Yeah.
The way they ended it, it could have gone either way.
Yeah, it did. Can you remind me how it ended?
Okay, so they, so the son, I guess almost died, and he was somewhere in a hospital
Oh, yeah.
rehab facility, and
Right.
the dad had come to see him and was helping him walk even, and they were sitting
Mm,
outside on a bench outdoors. He got him out of the building and into the fresh air,
yep.
and basically they were just sitting there hanging out, and I think it showed that there was still such a good connection and so much love between the two.
Yeah.
And it was just heartbreaking if you're a parent, or even if you're not a parent, if you just love someone that you can't help and they're missing, and that they're out there and they could be dead or alive and they're in danger, but you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And it was a sad movie. Very
It
sad.
was, it was, it was. And I knew it was going to be, and it was very depressing in some sense. Well, it was not. I wouldn't say depressing is the right word. Sad, what you said is the right word. It was sad. It would bring tears to your eyes, especially, and I think anybody, I bet you most families in America have been impacted by addiction or mental illness in one way or the other,
Yes.
whether it be someone in their family or someone they know that's close to them. So, just having it touch your life like that is was very moving, obviously. And from me and you and those of us that are watching the live stream, we could see it from both perspectives, as both the addict and as someone who loves someone who's an addict.
Yes.
And I've been on both sides for sure, and it's not easy.
No, and there are not that many recovery films. There are not that many recovery movies anyway, I don't think, to pick from,
Yeah,
because when we were trying to figure out titles, I was looking up, there are not that many that you can really
yeah.
find, but this is a great one for people to just know what the experience is like.
Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah. So anyway, I got a little bit distracted. Um,
I love watching movies. I could watch movies and talk about them every Saturday. I love it.
you do a good job with it. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But it's just like I said when we started, I have this overall sense of the movie and a feeling, and maybe a movie like this I actually process for a few days,
Yeah.
and think about. But I it's hard for me sometimes to just kind of recall the details of it. And I watched this movie like one and a half times. I watched it last night, and then I watched about halfway through this morning, just trying to pick things up.
It's
But
intense. I've been thinking about it ever since as well.
yeah.
Mhm.
So addiction is sad. I am sad when I think about what I put my parents through and what my son put us through. And Joe Bob, let's not talk about traditions. I'm not. This isn't AA. This is a live stream, and I don't have to follow any sort of AA traditions. I can talk about, and we can talk about anything we want to. And in this podcast, we cover all addictions. So this isn't an AA podcast. I can see where people would be confused because it certainly started that way. It started as AA Beyond Belief, and it was a component. It was really more focused on AA, but we're not so much anymore. And I personally don't follow traditions when it comes to this podcast. I don't. So there you go on that.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think it was about addiction. Yeah, it could have
yeah,
been any that he could have had any other addiction. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, we
You
can
know,
talk about whatever we want to
we
here.
can. And
Yeah,
what I learned anyway, what I totally believe that okay, I do believe that addiction is addiction, whether regardless of what it is that your drug you're using or behavior you're engaging in. Yes, there are unique, specific, components that are unique to each one. Someone who has an alcohol addiction will have different, experiences than someone who's a meth addict or whatever. But ultimately, physically, what's going on and emotionally, what's going on is pretty much the same thing. The cycle of addiction is the same, and the way out of it is pretty much the same. That's why, a lot of support programs don't really focus on what you were addicted to, but focus on the path out. The recovery process, the changes that you're going to be going through. And even in AA meetings, you can talk about any kind of drug you did. The only requirement in an AA meeting is that you have a desire to stop drinking. It doesn't mean that you can't also have other problems.
Right.
But it's always been my
And
understanding
each
that.
group is autonomous. They could, pretty
Exactly.
much
They
tell
could
people
do
what they
that
want.
however they want to.
Yeah. But someone here had a quote that said, "An alcoholic will steal your wallet. A meth addict will steal your wallet and help you look for it."
Oh, I missed that one.
That was good. I hadn't heard that. That was a good one.
Yeah. Walker says, "How about the rate of those who refuse to come to AA?" We don't know.
It's huge.
And yeah, and it is. It is. I'm thankful for this though, that there are options for people, because there was a time I didn't know that there were options out there, and I would think to myself, okay, if we screw up this guy who comes into our meeting, if we don't do our very best to get him to come back, if he just leaves and never comes back, he may never get well. Well, no, he might go to LifeRing. He might go to Smart Recovery. He might find some other avenue for it, that he might have just said, "Oh, this isn't for me." So hopefully, there are options like that available for people now. And they're more accessible now for sure, because of in post COVID, more of these groups are online. Like
Very
LifeRing, for
true.
example, really, really ballooned. So yeah, John says what I just kind of said. Addiction is addiction. I don't think it matters what you're addicted to. Yeah. Oh, hey, Jay, Monty, good to see you. You're wondering why. I'm wondering what you're wondering why about. I don't know. Oh,
Wonder
Lord.
why there's what is the rate of people not coming to AA?
Oh, I don't
Oh,
know.
right. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah, the religious part. Yeah. Well, that is true. I mean, it does turn off people. And wasn't there some sort of a mention in
There was.
this? There
Yeah.
wasn't there? Someone said there's too much God. Who said that?
Somebody in there said that. Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Someone in the it was one of the addicts, and I can't remember where it was, but I picked up on that they didn't like that. And maybe it was the girl. I don't know who it was, but it was kind of interesting that they would say that. But for sure that is a big turnoff for a lot of people.
Yeah, for a lot of people, and I've gone to traditional meetings where people, a lot of their shares are about, they don't believe in God, but this is how I deal with that concept while I'm in AA. And so,
Yeah.
I just want a megahorn to want a thing to say, there is a thing called secular AA.
Yeah.
It's out there. You can find it. A lot of people don't know that. They just have to um, work
Yeah.
around it. They work
Yeah.
around it.
Yeah. Yeah. And they don't have to do that. So anyway, there are options. There are
There are so many more options.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we're lucky about that. So anyway, I don't know what more to say about this movie, Mary.
It's good. And also, don't, if you're going to watch it or after we've been talking about it, at the end, it has the credits, and at the end of the credits is a whole nother thing that you don't want
Oh
to miss,
yeah,
where
that's right.
the son talks, and it's at the end of the credits. So if you didn't know it was coming, you might turn it off. And it was a beautiful talk that he gave about what his life was like, and I
Yeah,
think it's worth watching to the very end.
absolutely. That is really beautiful what he wrote, and then and it being read like that at the end of the movie. Panamuse has a nice comment here. Being a nurse in recovery, I sometimes wish there were more specified NA groups for nurses with a history of narcotic diversions.
Yes.
I did not know that they didn't have that in NA, but I know in AA there are some groups that are specifically tailored for medical professionals, people in the medical field, nurses, doctors, because they do have um, unique needs and different.
Yeah.
Um, well, one thing is just for doctors and nurses, and there's a certain thing where the public respects you or whatever, and if and there's anyway, there's a lot going there. Panamuse, maybe I could have you on an episode to talk about that sometime if you're willing. It might be interesting. We did a live stream, Angela and I, probably a couple years ago, I guess, or a year ago, about the special issues that doctors and other medical professionals have with addiction. And interestingly enough, the success rate for medical professionals when it comes to recovery is sky high. And the reason for that is if they if it's impacted their job, they are required to do this very, very intense follow up to keep their license to practice medicine. And I think that that's a big motivating force for them. I think the same might be true for pilots too, but for sure, I remember reading the statistics for success rates for medical people very, very high because of that.
Yes, there's a thing for pilots too, and they have their own recovery groups that
Yep.
I've seen at traditional conventions
Yep.
that they're very protective of because they could lose their jobs easily. They have
Birds of
their
a
own,
feather.
yep, birds of a feather for
Yep.
pilots.
Yep. We did an interview. There's a guy that's on the board of Secular AA who is a member of Birds of a Feather. And I did an episode with him about
Oh,
that.
good.
It's
I'll have to look that up.
yeah, very, very interesting about how it started too. Um, so anyway, a lot of good comments here. Let's go through these. JB77, I've always been interested in the marriage between science, secular-based recovery, coupled with humanist existential exploration, which the 12-step programs do uncover. I love that comment. Thank you, JB. That's a really nice comment. I'm beginning to appreciate more after that episode I did with the person who wrote the book about William James. After I and she was like, she's a philosopher, and she kind of explained to me that it's that something that we're missing in psychology sometimes is the human aspect. If you just make it so clinical,
Yeah.
um, and so I'm starting to appreciate that and a little bit more now. So and I love that too. That you don't want to forget the humanity of it. It's nice to know about the science and how it all works. And I rely on that a lot. I love science, but don't forget about the human part of it either. So yeah, especially because their exposure is higher daily. I think you're talking about the medical
Yeah.
professionals there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The availability.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Cool. That'll be wonderful, Panamuse. I'd love to explore that topic in more detail. Um, to have you on there. And then John says, I did go to a meeting for healthcare professionals in the beginning, but too much ego stuff for me. I had to get ego problems already. So yeah, I know that they do have a medical professional group in AA here in Kansas City, and I obviously have
Yeah, they
not
have
been
one
to it.
here too for I know someone who's in one here.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And
Mm-hmm.
they're closed so that they can maintain their anonymity in a
Right.
good way. Yep.
Right. Oh, there's a lot of interesting professions that where the people have a hard time with recovery or being out in their recovery. So pilots would be one, medical professionals would be one, therapists could be another one, and teachers. We did an episode about educators in recovery and some of the special issues surrounding that, and a lot of it comes with the public perception of that person because of the role they play. You know, the public perception of a doctor or teacher, and putting them kind of like on a pedestal, I guess. You know, and that's a lot of pressure to put on anyone. And I remember in all the cases where I talked to people in those professions, that was one of the components I thought they all kind of had in common. And the if you're in a small town or something, to be known publicly, you know, the teacher who's in had these alcohol problems or
Yeah, who's
whatever.
a drunk? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So could definitely be some interesting issues there. So yeah, I'd love to have you on Panamese to talk about that.
And if anybody has any other titles of movies they've seen about recovery or addiction, I would love to have titles, more titles to look
Yeah. And you know, I can't remember who it was. I think it was John who was asking about where I announced these things. I tell you what, if you go to the website beyondbeliefsobriety.com, you can sign up for the mailing list. And I have not been using that so much, but I can use that as a way of making announcements of what we're going to be doing for the coming week. And if I'm better about doing that, I think that we could get even more people to know about the live stream and come to the live stream. And it might be a good way for everyone to know, because all I'm doing now, I'm just posting it on YouTube and Facebook
at.
as a way to kind of announce what the live stream will be. But I can send that. Let me see if I can just get a link for it real quick.
Probably have a much bigger group. I mean,
Yeah,
how many people would it go out to more on the newsletter?
yeah. Like right now, I already have like 160 people signed up for it, which is good. I honestly, I think I've only sent one out so far, but I can start just doing some simple little announcements. I'm gonna go ahead and post a link to the newsletter in here, so if anybody wants to, where am I? There we are. Boom.
And also, I'd like, give us some ideas about what to talk about on the podcast.
Yes, for sure,
Yeah.
for
It doesn't
sure.
have to be a movie, just what would be a good theme, or who would you like to hear from, special guest wise?
Dale attended a meeting with a doctor that lost his license. He still works in healthcare and must do a weekly drug test to maintain employment. Yep, that's the thing, and I think that's what really helps with the success rate of doctors. Is that if they want to practice medicine, they are under intense observation for, I think, maybe the rest of their career. I don't know,
Yeah,
but it's
probably.
pretty
Yep.
intense. So I also knew a doctor that was he ended up dying. He ended up dying of a drug overdose in a hotel room all by himself.
Oh,
He could never put any
just couldn't
time
do it.
together,
Yeah.
and yeah, very very sad the how that ended.
Mm.
But I remember him very well, coming to meetings and his struggles, and he um he actually worked as a doctor the entire time, and it was crazy, Mary, because the hours he would work, I don't know how anyone could be expected to do that. It's like you don't sleep.
Agreed.
He would work at this hospital like almost like around the clock, crazy hours. And so I mean that alone could I mean I
Totally.
could
You have to medicate somehow for
oh
that.
my
And
god,
that's why
yeah.
medical students, I just think that hopefully they're changing the routine so
Too much.
they're not forced to be in those kind of
It's
schedules.
too much pressure, having to sleep in the hallway or whatever. Yeah. Um
I have a friend from college who became a
yeah.
physician, and he died of cirrhosis of the liver on his 50th birthday week. And he
Mm,
knew that he needed a liver transplant, but he knew that he couldn't stop drinking. So he just kept drinking until almost the day he died. And he was 50. And
yeah.
he just could never conceive of life. He was the most wonderful person I've known, but he could not imagine living without drinking. So he didn't, and he just died. And his brother died as well, same way.
Mhm. Um
So Walker
so
says A Star is Born. Okay, we'll look for that. That's the one with the original any of the versions. Gotcha.
right. Someone was asking if I gave the right email address or website address. That goes to Mailchimp, which is the program I use for the newsletter, which is really nice because it has a link where people can unsubscribe anytime they want to. But you can just go to the website beyondbeliefsobriety.com, and there is a just click on newsletter, and something will come up where you can sign up for it to beyondbeliefsobriety.com, and you'll find the newsletter on the top menu. Okay, JB, my experience of 12-step programs use similar language used in gay conversion program where you need to pray the gay away. In this case, you need to pray the higher power to remove addiction. Oh boy, that's interesting.
That's
Yeah,
a really I've never thought of that before, but I agree with
yeah,
you on that.
yeah, I do too. It's almost like when you have to have a God to take away your problem. It's like you're already putting some
Well,
moral you
it's
know,
not only moral, but it's just like a conversion process.
yeah,
And
yeah,
churches are already in that business and they've got that locked down, so I don't see why they can't just hold the fort on that one. And AA doesn't have a steeple on the top of the clubhouse last I looked.
true. So, John, I was lucky that my license was not in jeopardy when I got sober. There's a strong economic incentive, and we see addicts routinely in healthcare. A good reminder of what is still out there for us. Very good. So anyway, thank you all for those comments. That was really kind of you. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Like I said, sometimes I'm not so great about remembering details of movies, but it was great talking to Mary because she remembered what I might not remember, and basically all we had to do is have a conversation about it. It was definitely a movie that was deeply moving, and impacted me, and I personally, and I would recommend it to anybody who is interested in addiction and
Same
to
here.
watch. Yeah.
Yep, same here.
So I guess we kind of wound things up. Sometimes we'll wind up a little bit early. I don't know if we already kind of gave our announcements. So we have stuff coming up in October, and I really would like to have some people. We'll do another episode, maybe another live stream, get some people from the board on to talk about the conference if they want to,
Yeah.
and we can even post that out there as an audio podcast as well, so that people can find it. A
Oh, that's
star
great.
a Star is Born. I think that Angela and I did that, but we could do it again. That was a good movie. I think the one that anyway, I'll have to go back and look. I can't remember.
There's one with Chris Christopherson, I think.
Oh, that's the one from the original one from the 1970s.
But
We
then
could
there's one with Judy Garland, I think.
there's a more recent one with
Lady Gaga.
Lady Gaga. That's the one that Angela and I did. Um the clubhouse doesn't have a steeple. He likes that comment.
I used to say that when I was at the Clubhouse group conscience, and it didn't go over well.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see if I can get us on out of here with a little bit of disco. Okay, everyone, we did it. Y'all take care, be well. We'll be back again next week talking about something. Bye-bye.